The old mansion stood on a desolate hill, shrouded in an eerie silence. Its silhouette loomed against the twilight sky, like a jagged tooth in the mouth of a nightmare. The house was once grand, now just a decaying corpse of rotting wood and peeling paint. The wind howled through the broken windows, whispering tales of forgotten tragedies. The air around the mansion was heavy, thick with a palpable sense of dread. It felt ancient, burdened by unseen eyes and unheard whispers. This was a place where shadows lingered too long, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The very stones of the house seemed to radiate a cold that seeped into the bones, a coldness that whispered of darker things. A group of friends, 4 in all, stood before the rusted iron gates, their breath visible in the cold night air. They were drawn by the thrill of the unknown, the allure of the forbidden, a magnetic pull that none of them could resist. They called themselves urban explorers, seekers of forgotten stories in abandoned places, always on the hunt for the next adventure. There was Liam, the skeptical one, always ready with a logical explanation, his mind a fortress of reason. Emily, the adventurous one, thrived on the adrenaline rush of the unknown, her heart racing with every new discovery. Ben, the quiet observer, documented their explorations with his camera, capturing every eerie detail through his lens. And Sarah, the sensitive one, who felt a chill run down her spine the moment they approached the house, her intuition always on high alert. They pushed open the creaking gates, the rusty hinges groaning like a tortured soul, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. Each step towards the house seemed to deepen the silence, as if the house itself was drawing in the sound, consuming it into its depths, creating an almost palpable tension. As they crossed the threshold, a cold gust of wind slammed the door shut behind them, sealing them within the belly of the beast, the darkness swallowing them whole. The air inside was stale and heavy, thick with the smell of decay and dust. It felt as though the house itself was breathing, exhaling years of neglect and abandonment. The last rays of the setting sun struggled to penetrate the grime-coated windows, casting long dancing shadows across the dusty floor. The light seemed to fight a losing battle against the encroaching darkness. The silence they had felt outside was gone, replaced by a symphony of soft, unsettling noises. Every creak and groan of the old house seemed amplified, echoing through the empty halls. The whisper of the wind through broken panes sounded like mournful sighs. It was as if the house itself was lamenting its forgotten past. A floorboard creaked somewhere in the depths of the house. The sound was sharp and sudden, breaking the eerie stillness. Liam ran his hand along a wall, his fingers tracing the outline of a cobweb. The delicate threads clung to his skin, a reminder of the house's long-forgotten inhabitants. "This place is creepy," he admitted, his voice unusually hushed. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to demand silence, as if speaking too loudly might awaken something best left undisturbed. Emily, her eyes shining with excitement, chuckled. "That's why we're here, right?" Her laughter echoed through the empty rooms, a stark contrast to the somber surroundings. But Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, the sensation of unseen eyes boring into her back. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, every corner a lurking presence. A sudden cold gust of wind extinguished their only lantern, plunging them into darkness. The blackness was absolute, swallowing their surroundings and leaving them in a void of uncertainty. Panic seized them as darkness enveloped the house like a suffocating blanket. Fumbling for their flashlights, they flicked them on, the beams cutting through the oppressive gloom. But as their eyes adjusted, they noticed something strange. The shadows in the room seemed to twist and writhe, as if alive. They danced and contorted, defying the angles of the light. Objects seemed to move on their own, a chair scraping across the floor, a curtain billowing inwards as if from an unseen wind. A sudden crash from upstairs sent chills down their spines. "What was that?" whispered Ben, his voice tight with fear. Liam, ever the skeptic, dismissed it as the wind, but even he sounded unsure. They exchanged uneasy glances, the unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. Were they truly alone in this house of shadows? Driven by a mixture of fear and curiosity, they ascended the creaking staircase, their footsteps echoing in the deathly quiet house. Each step seemed to amplify the silence, making their hearts race faster. They reached a long, narrow hallway. The walls seemed to close in on them, adding to the suffocating atmosphere. The air here was even colder, heavy with a palpable sense of dread. It felt as if unseen eyes were watching their every move. Their flashlight beams danced across the peeling wallpaper, revealing faded portraits of people with hauntingly sad eyes. The eyes in the portraits seemed to follow them, adding to their unease. As they moved down the hallway, Ben, his camera constantly snapping, captured something truly terrifying. He felt a chill run down his spine as he reviewed the images. The image on his camera screen showed the hallway, but in the background, partially obscured by shadow, was a face. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was a horrifying visage, pale and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to burn with an unnatural light. The intensity of the gaze was almost unbearable. The face was gone in the next instant, vanished as quickly as it had appeared. They were left staring at the empty hallway, their minds racing. Ben showed the image to the others, his hand shaking. The reality of what they had seen began to sink in. Fear, stark and cold, gripped their hearts. They were not alone. The presence in the house was undeniable, and it was watching them. Panic rose in their throats like bile. They were no longer just exploring, they were being hunted. Every creak of the floorboard, every rustle of leaves against the windows sounded like approaching footsteps. The house seemed to press in on them, the air growing thick with unseen menace. They decided to leave, to run from this place of shadows and whispers, but the house had other plans. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before them, the exit they had used to enter nowhere in sight. They were lost in a labyrinth of their own fear, a blood-curdling scream, inhuman and filled with unimaginable agony, echoed from the depths of the house, followed by a chilling silence. They were frozen in place, their blood turning to ice in their veins. They ran, their fear lending them speed. They raced through darkened hallways, their flashlight beams bouncing off the walls, creating a dizzying kaleidoscope of light and shadow. The house seemed determined to trap them, every turn leading to a dead end, every corridor twisting back on itself. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else, something metallic and sharp, the smell of fear. They found themselves back in the room with the faded portraits, the ghostly eyes of the people in the pictures seeming to follow their every move. The door slammed shut with a resounding boom, the sound echoing through the house like a death knell. They were trapped, at the mercy of whatever lurked in the shadows. As they huddled together, their backs against the cold stone wall, the shadows in the room began to coalesce. They twisted and swirled, taking on a form both human and monstrous. The entity emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing with a cold, malevolent light. It was a figure of immense sadness and rage, its very presence radiating an aura of death and decay. It reached out towards them, its long skeletal fingers tipped with what looked like sharpened claws. Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "It's her!" she whispered, her voice trembling. "The woman from the portrait. She's real!" The entity let out a wail. a sound of pure anguish that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. The entity lunged. There were screams, the flash of a camera, and then darkness. The old mansion stood silent once more, the only sound the mournful whisper of the wind through the broken windows. The entity was gone, vanished back into the shadows from which it had crawled. But the house remained, a silent sentinel guarding its dark secrets. And somewhere within its decaying walls, a single camera lay on the dusty floor, its lens capturing the last horrifying moments of those who dared to disturb the slumber of the house on the hill. The night cry had been answered.